California. Home to over 40 million people, the land of sun, tech, and stars, stretching from the buzzing streets of Los Angeles to the iconic hills of San Francisco. Over the last 100 years, California's population has exploded, growing more than 50 times. But with that growth comes a looming danger, a threat so powerful, scientists call it the Big One. This isn't just another earthquake. We're talking about a potential magnitude 7.8 or even higher on the infamous San Andreas Fault. And in a state this densely packed with people and infrastructure, a quake that size could be catastrophic.
California is overdue for an even bigger earthquake.
So here's the big question. How bad could it be? What will it cost? And how many lives are we talking about? Experts warn, we're looking at tens of billions of dollars in damage and hundreds, if not thousands, of lives lost. But here's the twist. Long before modern science, voices were already warning of California's destruction. They were not geologists, they were prophets, preachers, and dreamers. For over 150 years, these warnings have echoed. California will shake. Cities will fall and waters will rush in. Some believed, but most laughed at their prophecies. But in 2025, after new tremors shook the state, the old prophecies now feel uncomfortably close. Stay with me, because before this video ends, we'll uncover the prophecy that terrified even mainstream scientists. Long before Richter scales and USGS maps, someone said this was coming. What if the first person to warn California lived in the 1800s and claimed she saw it in a vision? Our story begins over 150 years ago, when California was still young. Gold mines boomed and railroads were rising. Then one woman claimed she saw the state's doom before it happened. Her name was Ellen G. White, a frail woman with piercing eyes. Co-founder of the Seventh-day Adventist movement, had visions so detailed and specific that they've been studied and analyzed for over a century. But her prophetic vision about California earthquakes will absolutely haunt your dreams. Ellen said God gave her visions. They came suddenly, sometimes in public and sometimes at night. She would collapse into trances, her eyes would open, and her breathing would go shallow. Then she would speak of things to come. In the late 1800s, one vision shocked her followers. White described California cities collapsing in violent earthquakes. She saw fire and smoke rising from the ruins, and she saw people running through broken streets. They were terrified and were screaming. But here's what makes her vision particularly terrifying for 2025. She specifically saw these events near Loma Linda, California, which sits right on top of the San Andreas Fault system in San Bernardino County. One early account said she described buildings falling into holes in the earth. She spoke of oceans roaring inland, and she warned that judgment would strike the West Coast. Her followers were stunned at her revelation. Some believed her immediately, while others whispered that she was imagining disasters for fear or control. The wider public laughed. Secular newspapers dismissed her as hysterical, and even some religious voices said her visions were metaphors and not predictions. But then came April 18, 1906. San Francisco burned because a 7.9 magnitude quake tore the city apart. Thousands of people died, and the images matched Ellen's visions chillingly well. This made her reputation among believers solidify even more. To them, she had warned California long before seismologists ever could. But some critics pushed back. They said that she just predicted unnecessary doom for decades and that earthquakes are inevitable. What makes White's vision particularly bone-chilling is the urban focus. She didn't see a remote earthquake in the middle of nowhere. She saw major populated areas being utterly devastated. We're talking about areas where millions of people live, work, and raise their families. Areas that, in 2025, are far more densely populated than they were during White's time. White saw buildings constructed with modern materials, steel and concrete, being torn apart like paper in a hurricane. She described the sound of the earthquake as being like thunder that never stops, rolling across the landscape in waves of destruction. But here's what will really get your attention. White saw the earthquake triggering secondary disasters. Fire broke out across the urban landscape as gas lines ruptured and electrical systems failed. Water mains burst, flooding areas that weren't already buried under rubble. Transportation systems completely shut down, trapping people in the disaster zone. She saw the earthquake being felt far beyond California's borders. The tremor was so massive that it shook buildings in neighboring states and was felt as far away as the Rocky Mountains. What's particularly unsettling is how White's vision aligns with modern seismological predictions. Scientists today warn about the same areas White saw being destroyed. They talk about the same secondary disasters, fires, flooding, and infrastructure collapse. It's as if her spiritual vision was seeing the same catastrophic event that geologists now warn is scientifically inevitable. Do you think it's possible for spiritual visions to reveal future natural disasters with scientific accuracy? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because 150 years later, another voice rose, and this time, it pointed directly at the San Andreas Fault. Richard Ruhling isn't your typical prophecy teacher. While others throw around vague predictions, this man cracks biblical codes like a spiritual data analyst. His book, Megaquake, reads like intelligence briefings from another dimension, connecting ancient patterns to modern disasters with precise directness. Here's what'll stop you cold. Ruhling predicted the 2008 financial collapse years before it happened by connecting biblical sabbatical year patterns to modern economic cycles. When Wall Street was celebrating record highs, Ruhling was warning about inevitable collapse. Sound familiar? That's because he's doing the same thing now with California's earthquake destiny. Ruhling even hinted at the 2020s. He believed that America's turning point in faith and morality would align with disasters on the West Coast. Critics immediately reacted. Adventist commentators called Ruhling an alarmist. Prophecy bloggers accused him of using fear to sell prophecy books. As Gary Hayes warned, psychics predict earthquakes all the time and are almost invariably correct. Because California regularly experiences minor quakes, such predictions lack meaningful accuracy. Ruhling stayed firm. He pointed to quakes like Ridgecrest 2019. This is the warning before the judgment. Ruhling's research reveals that every major catastrophic earthquake in recorded history has followed specific biblical timing patterns. Not random geology, but divine scheduling. And according to his calculations, 2025 hits every single prophetic marker for the most devastating seismic event in American history. But here's where it gets personal for anyone living in America. Ruhling's biblical research shows that when California falls, the economic shockwaves don't just ripple outward. They create a domino effect that restructures the entire American economy. Those tech jobs that power our digital world, that booming agricultural sector that feeds the nation, all of it depends on California staying upright. You know how you've been feeling like the economy is held together with duct tape and wishful thinking? Ruhling's research suggests that California's earthquake will be the moment when that duct tape finally snaps. The supply chains you've been worried about? The inflation that's been eating your paycheck? All of that becomes catastrophic when California's economy craters in a matter of minutes. Ruhling connects Ellen White's vision of buildings toppling near Loma Linda to biblical patterns of divine warning through natural disasters. Have you ever wondered if your growing sense of unease about the future might actually be spiritual discernment picking up on prophetic warnings? Because Ruhling's biblical patterns suggest that sensitive people often sense coming disasters months or years before they manifest. August 2025 just arrived, and the ground shook twice in a single afternoon. It happened on the Rialto and Oak Hills grounds. People paused as they remembered Ruhling's words, and they wondered if this was a whisper before the scream. Because the next prophecy wasn't just about shaking ground, it spoke of waters rushing in and coastlines breaking apart. Perry Stone's tsunami dreams will absolutely destroy any peace of mind you might have left about California's future. Perry Stone is an evangelist and a preacher of the end times. He is a man who has spent decades sharing dreams, visions, and interpretations of global events. Stone often preached that judgment begins at the coasts. And in vision after vision, he said the West Coast would face a shaking unlike any other. Stone describes specific geographical devastation with the precision of someone who's lived through it. Except he's seeing it before it happens. In one message, he said that the Lord showed him the ground would split and that water would invade the land. He spoke of tsunami-like surges, and he described highways cracking open and buildings crumbling like sandcastles. To his followers, this wasn't theater. It was a divine siren. In Stone's most terrifying dream, he watched the Pacific Ocean suddenly rise like a moving mountain, carrying entire cities inland like toys in a bathtub. But here's what makes his vision a personal nightmare for anyone who understands how our economy really works. Those aren't just California cities being destroyed. They're the ports that handle 40% of everything Americans buy. Stone saw the port of Los Angeles underwater, with massive shipping containers floating like building blocks scattered by a giant child. You know how you've been feeling like our modern lifestyle is more fragile than people want to admit? Stone's dreams show exactly what happens when the systems maintaining that lifestyle get wiped out in a matter of hours. Stone described seeing interstate highways underwater, with abandoned vehicles floating in the surge like an automotive graveyard. Major transportation arteries that connect California to the rest of the nation were simply gone, washed out to sea along with the economic connections that keep goods flowing to American markets. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to watch your entire understanding of how the world works get washed away in real time? Stone's dreams suggest that's exactly what millions of Americans are about to experience. Secular commentators said his predictions lacked any specific timeline or scientific backing. One skeptical article wrote, "Every generation has its doomsayers. They speak loudly after quakes, then vanish when nothing happens." Still, Stone's warnings kept coming. Early this year, his old prophecies began trending again on social media because California shook twice in 1 year. April brought a 5.2 magnitude quake in San Diego County. August brought the Rialto and Oak Hills tremors. But what if someone saw the entire state splitting apart and believed the vision was a final warning? The last prophecy is the most dramatic, and for some, it's the most terrifying. Price claimed vivid dreams and visions of California's destruction. He spoke of standing above a broken Los Angeles. The highways were twisted like ribbons, and the skyscrapers leaned into clouds of dust. In one vision, he described that the coastline broke away and that he saw the Pacific rushing where homes once stood. These weren't casual remarks. Price went public online and in church gatherings to make his vision known. He said God showed him California's fall if the nation didn't turn back to him. Tim Price's prophecy hits differently because it's not some distant future prediction. He's talking about right now, this year. While you're watching this video, the geological pressure he saw in his vision is building under California like a bomb with a timer nobody can see. In Price's vision, he saw the San Andreas Fault rupturing in multiple segments simultaneously, creating what he described as a super-earthquake that would break every existing record. But here's where it becomes everyone's problem. He saw the earthquake being felt across multiple states. Ground motion so severe that buildings would sway hundreds of miles away, and everyone would realize that California's disaster is America's disaster. Price described seeing something that connects to every fear you've had about our current economic situation. The earthquake triggering immediate financial system collapse. Not just in California, but nationwide. Shared videos of his testimony reached tens of thousands. But with exposure came intense criticism. Some prophecy scholars called him reckless. They said his visions were too vague, too open to interpretation. Skeptics online were harsher, some said. Another internet prophet predicting California's end. I'll believe it when LA floats into the Pacific. Still, for believers, Price's vision fit a chilling pattern. A line of prophecies stretching from Ellen White in the 1800s to Perry Stone and modern preachers today. Price's 2025 vision included details that'll resonate with anyone who's been feeling like we're living in end times, the earthquake serving as a catalyst for massive spiritual awakening, but only after it destroys everything people thought they could depend on. Churches become survival centers. Prayer becomes the only communication system that still works. Faith becomes the only currency that matters. Here's what makes Price's prophecy particularly urgent. He specifically connected it to increased small earthquake activity that California has been experiencing in recent months. It feels as though we're in the final countdown to something massive. Price's vision suggests that those smaller earthquakes are the timer ticking down to zero. Do you ever feel like you're living in the last normal days before everything changes forever? Price's 2025 prophecy suggests that feeling isn't paranoia, it's prophetic discernment picking up on imminent reality. These are 4 prophecies with 4 very different voices. But one theme echoes through them all. California will shake, the coast will suffer, and the world will notice. From Ellen White's 19th century visions to Tim Price's 21st century dreams, the pattern is unmistakable. But here's the chilling part. Science and history say they might not be entirely wrong. Because what modern seismology knows makes the prophecies sound less like superstition and more like an overdue inevitability. For generations, these prophetic voices warned of a day California would break. Skeptics laughed. But then science caught up. Beneath the California sunshine runs the San Andreas Fault, a violent scar 800 miles long. From the Salton Sea in the south to Cape Mendocino in the north, it divides the state in two. Geologists call it a strike-slip fault. 2 massive slabs of the earth grinding against each other like teeth on a saw. Most days, the movement is invisible, but when the pressure releases, it's instant destruction. This is what history keeps reminding us. April 18, 1906. San Francisco slept in fog until the ground tore itself apart. A 7.9 magnitude quake shook for less than 1 minute. The earth ripped open 296 miles of fault line. Gas mains burst and wooden homes ignited. Fire roared for 3 days, and over 3,000 people died. More than 80% of the city was burned to ash. Witnesses described that the streets split open, and horses screamed. Church bells rang without hands touching them. For many, this was Ellen White's vision made real. January 17, 1994. In Northridge, Los Angeles, there was a 6.7 magnitude quake at 4:31 a.m. Freeways collapsed like paper bridges. Apartment buildings pancaked onto parked cars, and the city lost over $20 billion in damages. Americans watched live TV coverage of their own city crumbling. July 4th and 5th, 2019. 2 quakes erupted in Ridgecrest, California. They were 6.4 and 7.1 in magnitude, and they shook the Mojave Desert. Cameras captured power lines whipping like jump ropes, and cracks tore across desert highways. Scientists called it a wake-up call for the big one because the San Andreas hadn't moved yet. And when it does, experts say it could change California forever. The term, the big one, isn't from prophecy. It comes from geologists. The USGS, United States Geological Survey, warns of a magnitude 7.8 or higher quake, likely to strike Southern California in this century. Here's the nightmare scenario. The San Andreas Fault will rupture for hundreds of miles. There will be freeways buckling, trapping millions. Gas lines will ignite, turning neighborhoods into firestorms, and water pipes will snap, leaving cities dry. A quake like this could kill tens of thousands. It could cause over $200 billion in damage. Experts say Los Angeles would be cut off for weeks. Parts of the Central Valley could sink into liquefied soil, and if the rupture hits the coastal shelf, it could trigger localized tsunamis, thereby sending walls of water against the shore. When you hear this from scientists, Ellen White's visions and Perry Stone's warnings sound less like imagination and more like foreshadowing. Those feelings you've been having about something massive building toward a breaking point? The scientific data confirms your intuition has been picking up on real warning signs that most people are too distracted to notice. Ellen G. White, who saw cities fall in the 1800s, Richard Ruhling, who linked faith and fault lines, Perry Stone, warning of coastal floods and fire, and Tim Price, dreaming of California splitting apart. All of these people faced criticism. Skeptics called them fearmongers, superstitious, and exploitative. Even some Christians doubted their messages. But nature doesn't care about arguments. The San Andreas waits in silence and unmoved for now. We've already seen tremors this year. In April 2025, a 5.2 magnitude tremor struck San Diego County. August 5, 2025, 3.5 in Rialto, and minutes later, 3.7 in Oak Hills. No skyscrapers fell, but the timing is chilling. People asked, are these the first knocks before the big one kicks the door open? California stands beautiful and bright tonight, but beneath the ground, pressure builds. Prophets have warned, some critics disagreed and mocked them, but science agrees. It will happen. The only question is, when? If you live in California, look at the freeways, the cities, and the coastline. One day, the ground will move. And when it does, history will remember the warnings we ignored. What you do with that confirmation is up to you. The prophets have spoken. The science confirms it. The signs are all around us. California's earthquake isn't just coming, it's here. The only question is whether you'll be ready when the ground starts shaking and everything you thought was solid proves to be built on sand. Drop in the comments, have you been feeling like we're living in the calm before an unimaginable storm? Because these prophecies suggest that feeling isn't paranoia. It's preparation for what's about to become everyone's reality.